All right, thanks everybody for joining us on the latest episode of our North Dakota PTA Workshop Series on PTA grants. I'm Jeff Bacco, currently the treasurer for North Dakota's PTA. And thanks for joining on this one. It's a timely topic. We're in the middle of August here just before school starts. And as you'll hear in a few minutes, National PTA will be releasing their grant applications here in the next couple of weeks. So a very timely time to cover this particular topic. So we have a couple different things we're going to cover today. I'll just briefly go through the agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about grant sources, and we're going to focus mainly on the National PTA grants and grant cycle. But there are some other sources where you could possibly get grants for your PTA as well. We'll focus a little bit on past grants and programs that National PTA has to offer, and then we're going to get into some writing tips. There's some tips that National PTA has put together, and then some local ones we put together as well. And then we'll kind of wrap up with some resources that recap some of the places you can go look for more information on grants. So we'll spend a few minutes on that. It'll probably take us 15-20 minutes to cover some of this. So I'm going to really quickly go through some of the grant sources. As I mentioned, we're going to focus mainly on the National PTA's grants, which are scheduled to open up in the late part of August. So in the next 2 or so weeks, we should see that open up. Typically, National PTA has anywhere from 5 to a dozen grants, depending on how many sponsors they have and how many programs they're trying to sponsor. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then there are other sources, as I mentioned. You can go to local organizations, so some of the financial institutions and their foundations specifically. So Gate City Bank, Bremer Bank, other financial institutions have foundations that they've set up that offer grants for various different things. There's also a lot of private foundations. And I just found that National PTA has a tool on their website they link to called Candid that lets you search grants from across the nation. So that's an opportunity you might have if you're looking a little wider. Other nonprofits have grants. I know that locally here in Fargo, Cass County Electric, for instance, has grants that they offer. They call it the Roundup program, and they give that to based on needs. And they have some priorities that they're trying to fulfill in the community. So some things like that. And then lastly, checking with the Chamber of Commerce in your area might have sources of local businesses or even national businesses with a local presence that might offer grants that you can apply for as well. So various different sources you can look at depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But as I said, we're going to focus mainly on the National PTA level with this series. And National PTA has a number of different grants they've offered in the past. This list here is all the grants that were offered in the 2021-2022 school year. They varied from $500 to, I think they were up to $1,000. I don't think they had any $1,500 ones in this group, but they were connected to a lot of the programs, and we'll talk more about programs in a few minutes. But each of these had a sponsor, so you'll see some of them will have the sponsor names in them, some of them do not, but lots of national companies and international companies sponsored some of these for specific purposes. So that's just gives you an idea of how many grants are out there. Many of these had anywhere from, I think the smallest one was 2 recipient schools, PTAs, all the way up to like 30 around the nation. So there was a variety of different numbers that were being presented for these PTA grants. And you can find all this information at the link at the top, pta.org/grants. Everything's there, and you can link once they open up the grants. You'll be able to link from there right to the grant application. Okay, and I talked about a little bit about programs. So National PTA does tie all their grants to one of their programs, and there's primarily 7, I think, different programs that they're sponsoring. School of Excellence, which many of us know about, and some schools are actually a part of that this year, I saw. The Reflections program, which many of our schools, our PTAs offer at our schools as well for the arts side of things. Family Reading Experience for K-5 students. STEM Plus Families, which has been a perpetual one for as long as I've been part of PTA. They've offered grants around the STEM Plus Families, where you can have science, technology, engineering, and math family activities and engagement at your schools. Healthy lifestyles around the pillars of healthy body, healthy mind, healthy earth. And then PTA Connected, which is all about online and digital safety. And that's one that our school did a couple times with grants. We offered the PTA Connected nights with our families and talked about how to be safe online. So just a number of different programs, and each one of those will be then tied to some grants as they come out here shortly. Okay, so that's kind of a little background. We're going to spend the rest of the time talking about tips and tricks, and we have a guest on, Jolene, who's with the PTA here in Fargo and has been successful at getting some grants. So we want to make sure we captured Jolene's knowledge as well. And Jolene has to depart here in a little bit. So wanted to give Jolene, before we go through the list of things we might have, I want to give Jolene a chance to kind of share anything that you might have that you've done successfully to get some grants.
Thanks, Jeff. Our PTA at Ag Clap here in Fargo has received 2 or 3. We received one of the Be Internet Awesome grants a couple of years ago, I believe a STEM grant, and then this last year, one of the reading grants. And I would just say overall for folks to know that they're very easy to apply for. The application's one page or maybe 2 with just a handful of really specific questions, sharing information about your PTA, how you believe you would use the funds, and kind of your connection to the school. Each of the 3 grants that we've gotten also had a resource toolkit to really help us think about whether that was how we're advertising whatever event or activity we did, as well as some suggestions or ideas. And I think overall, besides the fact that they're really easy to apply for and the reporting is really pretty easy, just talking about how your event went, how many people participated, if they had specific partnerships that were requested, you know, was really straightforward, but the funding is really flexible. So when we applied, say, for this last reading grant, we had a pretty good idea and we wanted to do something with the school for one of their family title nights, and we weren't quite sure what piece of we ended up doing an assembly as well as purchasing books for each of the students, and we weren't quite sure when we wrote the grant which part the PTA funding would have covered versus what the school was able to. And it was nice because after we were awarded the grant, we were kind of given some time to flesh that out and to work with the school so we could leverage their resources. The PTA ended up purchasing some of the books, and then the school paid for the assembly. But at the end of the day, if it turned out that we did have some extra scholastic dollars to buy books, so if we didn't need to spend that entire grant on what we had planned, we would also be able to save that money and carry it over. So really flexible and worthwhile process to go through. And then similar to the other grants, we've received kind of the resources from the Be Internet Awesome grant we could use the next year and replicate it if we decided to. So it's interesting just to see what the priorities are each year and the ideas that come out. There's lots of support. I think we had 2 required calls that were just an hour long to talk over some of it. And then there was kind of a Facebook group where folks, if you wanted to join it, you could get ideas and hear what other PTAs were doing, but it certainly wasn't a requirement. So really straightforward and easy. And for $500 or $1,000, that really can go a long way in hosting an event or doing an initiative through PTA.
Great, thanks, Jolene. And how many people, you talked about the application being really easy to fill out and with some basic questions. Did you have a committee help you fill it out? Did you fill out yourself? How did that look?
I think for each of them, just one individual did it. We kind of ran it past our executive team and say, hey, we saw this grant might be a good fit. And so it was easy enough that really we just needed to answer some of the questions. And then we needed to, I think there was, you know, we had to send our bank account information as well, but otherwise I just applied for this last one myself. Someone else applied for the previous one. You certainly could take a committee approach. We more so did it just brainstorming ideas of what we could do under each initiative. And then one person submitted it. It was that simple.
Great, very good. Well, you certainly have been successful. Like you said, you've gotten a number of different grants over the years. So congratulations on that. And great to hear that was a success for you and your school.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Jeff.
Yeah. Right. Any last words of advice before we continue on with some of the other tips and tricks?
I think just keep your eye out each year. And we also, I think, have had some years we've applied and not applied and weren't sure if, if we didn't, do you need to apply every year? And that didn't seem to make a difference. So figure out, of those initiatives, what's a good fit for your school and what your focus is. It's not something you have to do every year, but it certainly is worthwhile to keep an eye out on what the different options are each year.
Great. Yeah, like you said, you've gotten different grants for reading and Be Connected, so you can rotate your school too if you don't want to have everybody go through the same things every single year. Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. All right, we're going to continue down some of the lists, but if you think of anything else and you're still on, please feel free to jump in. All right, so I'm going to go through a few different things of resources. So the first one is a tips sheet that National PTA publishes on their website. It's on that pta.org/grants page. And so you'll find this out there, but I thought I'd just run really quickly through this basics and we'll give you some deeper tips as well. So, the first one is just know what grants exist. And that again is the pta.org grants page, just keeping an eye out there, especially here as we get to closer in the end of August. And then last year there was 2 waves. There was an August wave of grants, and there was sort of a second wave that came, I think, in the September timeframe, if I'm not mistaken. So just keep an eye out there throughout the fall, because they'll oftentimes publish additional grants as monies become available later in the year. All right, so besides knowing what's out there and signing up, make sure your story is compelling. Make sure that you have a good idea what you're going to use with those funds, what again you're trying to fulfill as your mission with those funds, as Jolene mentioned earlier. And then sharing the impact of what will happen within your school community with those funds. What roadblocks are you removing? What connections are you making? What things are you enabling that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do without some financial support through the grant application? And then show your enthusiasm. Many, as I look at many of the grant applicants, they're super excited about the opportunity. They might not be able to do some of these things without these grants, without these programs. So make sure that comes through in your application as well, and how excited you are to be able to have that opportunity. Sounds kind of basic, but make sure you answer all the parts of the question. I know I'm talking to some of the national coordinators for grants in the past. You'd be surprised how many people don't fill out the whole application. They skip a question. They don't answer all the parts to a question that are outlined on the grant application. So just kind of make sure, and it kind of goes with the last one, have a second pair of eyes. But once you fill it out and you think you're done, just have a second person take a scan through it and make sure you didn't miss something. It's just an easy thing to do to help your success. And then also promote family engagement. As we all know, that's a core part of the National PTA mission, is to promote family engagement. And so if you can connect an opportunity like a STEM night with how you're going to bring families together, how you're going to touch parts of your community you don't normally get to interact with, how you're going to bring them all together, that's another piece to think about as you apply for these grants. Okay, some additional ones that I found. These are probably more applicable to broad grants, not necessarily to the National PTA grants, but I think they apply here as well. One is, you can have a single approach, as Jolene mentioned, or you can form a committee if you don't feel comfortable filling it out yourself. Find some other people to join with you, put together a group that can work together and kind of bounce ideas off of as you think about applying for and building your plan around a program and a grant. If you happen to have a parent that's experienced with filling out grants or even doing project plans or business plans, bring them along. They're a great asset to utilize as part of your committee as well, so they can kind of help you with that writing side of things and telling your story. Try to match your needs to the funder's interests. So if you know what the funder is trying to accomplish, if they're trying to accomplish community engagement, if they're trying to accomplish, there's some grants I've seen around hunger and other focuses. Make sure you're trying to position your application to fit that funder's interests and try to tell the story as part of what they're trying to accomplish as well. Follow the instructions. It kind of goes back to make sure you fill out the entire application and don't skip a step or skip a question. Just make sure that, again, you kind of filled out all the things they're looking for. If you do get a grant, always make sure you're thanking the funder or the sponsor of that grant. They often do this as part of building community relations, and so they love to hear about what's going on. I know in some of the grants we've gotten from National PTA, they might ask for some photos of the event, or how many people were you able to engage and get involved, just so they can kind of see the the impact that they're having with those funds, right? So those are all important things to think about afterwards as part of your wrap up. And then if you don't happen to get a grant application, it's okay to ask why did you not get it? What were the things that were missing? What did other successful grant applicants put in their story that you missed in yours? And that can be used for future. And if you don't get a grant the first time, don't be discouraged. Apply again. Those funds will kind of move around. I think National PTA has been really good as I look at the different states that get grants. They've been really good about rotating those so that one large state doesn't get every grant and the smaller states don't. They seem to kind of spread things around across the country. So you'll have an opportunity. It might not be every time, but if you understand the why you didn't get it, then you can help to build strength in your future applications. Okay, and then some other ones that I kind of pulled together from other schools in the state that have been getting grants. I just threw 3 additional things together too. One is, look at what past winners have done in their stories. So National PTAs are usually really good about doing a write-up of who won, kind of the schools, what their mission was, what they were trying to accomplish with their story. Sometimes they'll do a video of the after the event and what happened. Take a look at those and see what key elements are in all of those winners, because you can use those in your own applications as well. One thing that I did when I applied for our grants was I didn't put down a whole big project plan. It was too early, and I wasn't going to do that until I knew I had a program to work towards. But kind of build it in your head. Kind of answer the who do you want to attend? Who do you want to touch with your program? Is it families you haven't had come to events in the past? Is it virtual? Is it in person? What does it look like? Answer the when question, not necessarily what day of the week, but when's the best time to engage people? Is it morning to get them before school? Is it after school? Is it evening? Is it weekends? What's the best time to get the group you're looking for to come together? And kind of put that in your application, because that's part of the story of getting those people you want to be engaged. Where will it be? Will it be in the school? Will it be at a neutral site outside the school? What and why is that the best for engaging your audience? And then don't forget to talk about the how that money and how that program will make a difference in your community is kind of the big piece. What's that impact you want to have with your event? And the plan doesn't have to be complete by any means. In fact, I didn't write any of this down. It was all in my head as I was putting the application together, but it helped me build that story that I was trying to tell in the verbatims that I filled out in the application. And that, as Jolene mentioned, it can completely change. You don't have to have everything locked down when you apply for the grant. In fact, you won't. Everything will change as you start to really build it out, but it helps you kind of visualize what things will look like, so you can tell that story to the grant committee that's looking at these grant applications. If I was going to say one single thing, it would be make sure you do apply. Many people say, well, there's so many schools out there, so many PTAs, there's only 150 grants, I'm not going to get one. And I would say that's don't have that attitude, because you will. I mean, we've got several in the state that have gotten them in the last 5 years. We've been pretty successful. So the form's not too bad. It's pretty easy to fill out. It's a low, it probably takes you, maybe I spent, I don't know, Jolene, what do you think? I spent about an hour maybe filling it out at the most.
Yeah, I think so. 2 hours most in terms of the reading it ahead of time, maybe reaching out and brainstorming, but actually completing it. Yeah, an hour or less.
Yeah. Yep. So take that hour. It's not too bad. Get your grant application in. The worst thing that happens is you don't get it, but then you can use that again for next time, kind of save it off. And a lot of it is not unique necessarily, so you can use it again next time you fill out a grant application. But I know there's several times, especially pre-COVID, where we had applied for grants and then we got messages saying, hey, this particular grant didn't have anybody apply for it. We're looking for more applicants. Please put it in by Friday if you can. So make sure you get your application in there, because not every grant actually gets taken. Okay, thanks, Jolene. And make sure you tell your story. That's super important. And just again, answer that who, what, when, where, how questions. If you can kind of answer that in your plan, even if it's not complete, even if it's not perfect, you're just trying to make sure you're painting that vision for the committee as they review your application. Okay. And so I said we were going to kind of wrap up with some resources. There are a number of resources that can help. Obviously, the PTA grants site. You'll want to use that. That's where the application is. That's where the description of each of the grants will be and what they're looking for, what they're driving. They're trying to drive an impact around. But also there's local resources like Jolene, myself, and others in the state. So, use your local North Dakota PTA liaison. If they don't haven't had experience with grants, they know some of us who do, so they can kind of reach out and get questions answered, or give you tips, or even be that second set of eyes that can look over your application and give you some ideas. Use the North Dakota PTA leaders Facebook group, and hopefully you're all members of that. But use that group and ping them as well to get ideas if you're stuck, or if you're not sure how best to put together your application. And then finally, reach out to us here at North Dakota PTA if your liaison is not available, or the Facebook group's not giving you the answers you're looking for. We'll do what we can to try to help, either locally at the state level, or we can even reach out to the national level too and get some thoughts and ideas. So lots of resources that we can help you when you're doing that application process and get you through it. So again, don't be afraid to try. It's been a pretty successful program for the ones that I know have applied. We've had a pretty good success rate at getting grants across the state of North Dakota, and we'd love to see your PTA do that this year as well. And with that, we don't have, I don't think, any questions tonight, so we'll wrap up with that. But again, my name is Jeff Bacco here at the North Dakota State PTA. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at northdakotapta@gmail.com, or through the North Dakota PTA Facebook leaders group, and happy to help you any way we can. Thank you very much.